Steve Harvey, a millionaire, a TV icon, a global star. Yet in front of a crowd of celebrities and cameras, an usher leaned in and told him, "Sir, you'll have to give up your seat." Why? To make room for a wealthy white businessman. What Steve did next stunned the entire industry and cost the organizers millions. "Excuse me, Mr. Harvey, you'll have to give up your seat." Those words sliced through the noise of the room like a blade. Steve Harvey froze for a second, not quite believing what he had just heard. He was sitting comfortably in the velvet-lined VIP section of a luxury event in New York City, the kind of place where every flash of a camera captured the who's who of entertainment, politics, and business. The lights were bright, the stage was glowing, and Steve, dressed in his sharp, tailored suit, shoes shining like mirrors, felt right where he belonged until that usher leaned in. At first, Steve chuckled lightly. He thought it was one of those playful moments people sometimes create when they recognize a celebrity. Maybe it was a joke, or maybe the usher was trying to tease him. He even gave a small smile, waiting for the punchline. But the usher didn't smile back. His face stayed stiff, his voice clipped and professional. "No, sir. I'm serious." "We'll need this seat for another guest." Steve blinked. He tilted his head slightly as though he hadn't heard correctly. Another guest? His name had been personally placed on this seat card. He had been invited here as a special guest of honor. Why would anyone need his seat? And more importantly, why him? Before Steve could respond, the usher leaned in closer and added quietly, "It's for Mr. Johnson. He's one of our most important sponsors. We hope you understand." And that's when the truth hit Steve like a punch to the chest. The seat wasn't being taken because of a mistake. It was being taken because the organizers valued someone else, a wealthy white businessman, more than him. For a moment, Steve just sat there, his hands resting on his knees, his heart hammering inside his chest. The crowd around him had noticed the exchange. People were whispering, their eyes darting toward him, waiting to see what he would do. Some looked away quickly, pretending they hadn't noticed. Others stared, curious to witness how a man as powerful and famous as Steve Harvey would handle such open disrespect. Every second felt heavier than the last. Steve could feel heat rising up his neck, the kind of heat that comes from humiliation. He was no stranger to challenges in life. He had lived in his car for years before making it big. He had faced rejection after rejection. But this was different. This wasn't a private struggle. This was a public insult, delivered in the most humiliating way possible, by removing him from the seat where every camera, every audience member, every set of eyes could see him. Slowly, almost mechanically, Steve stood up. He could hear the shuffle of his own shoes against the carpet, the creak of the chair as he pushed it back. The usher stepped aside, gesturing politely but firmly toward another spot, one that was far from the cameras and far from the spotlight. Steve walked away from that front row seat, his back straight, his face composed. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. But inside, his mind was racing. Anger mixed with sadness. Dignity wrestled with fury, and the worst part? The man who took his seat, the wealthy sponsor, the so-called VIP of VIPs, didn't even look at Steve. He slid into the chair as if Steve had been nothing more than a placeholder, as if the man who had entertained millions, who had built an empire with his talent and grit, was invisible. Invisible. That was the word that echoed in Steve's head as he stood on the sidelines, pretending to be unbothered while his heart pounded like a drum. No one intervened. No organizer rushed to defend him. No fellow celebrity stood up in protest. The silence was deafening. And in that silence, Steve Harvey realized something powerful. He had been disrespected not because of who he was, but because of what they thought he wasn't. And that was a mistake they would soon regret. Steve Harvey had faced hardship before. From the time he was a little boy in West Virginia, life had been anything but easy. He grew up poor, the kind of poor where you counted every penny and wore shoes until the soles gave out. He had slept in his car for years while chasing his dream, eating whatever scraps he could afford, and telling himself every single night that one day things would be different. He had pushed through rejection after rejection, comedy clubs that told him he wasn't funny enough, TV executives who brushed him aside, and critics who thought he wouldn't last. But nothing, not the hunger, not the homelessness, not the years of rejection, prepared him for this moment. Nothing prepared him for the cold sting of public disrespect. The irony was almost cruel. The event he had been invited to was supposed to celebrate diversity, culture, and achievement. It was a night meant to showcase inclusion, to honor voices from all walks of life. Yet here he was, one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world, treated as if he was somehow less than someone else. The man who slid into his seat didn't even bother to glance at him. No nod of acknowledgement, no word of apology, not even the slightest recognition. He sat down with the entitlement of someone who believed the world revolved around him. In that moment, Steve felt something far worse than anger. He felt invisible. And so Steve moved to the side. He stood there trying to appear calm, his face composed, his hands folded in front of him. To the outside world, it might have looked like he didn't care. But inside, his blood was boiling. Fury mixed with shame, shame mixed with disappointment, and disappointment mixed with the painful memories of his past. He remembered what it felt like to be the kid everyone overlooked. He remembered the sting of being underestimated, dismissed because of his background, his accent, his skin color. He remembered being told to know his place. And now, standing in that glittering event hall with the cameras flashing and the crowd buzzing, it felt like history was repeating itself. But what hurt the most wasn't the usher's words. It wasn't even the arrogance of the man who took his chair. What cut the deepest was the silence. Not one organizer stepped forward to defend him. Not one celebrity sitting just a few seats away spoke up. Not one member of the audience whispered a word of protest. Everyone saw what had happened, but no one dared to intervene. They just sat there, quiet, complicit, as if this kind of treatment was normal. That silence told Steve everything he needed to know. To them, his presence wasn't as important as the money behind the sponsor. His worth wasn't measured by his talent, his achievements, or his humanity. It was measured by what he could give them. And that was a mistake. Steve Harvey wasn't just another entertainer. He wasn't just a man in a nice suit taking up a chair in the front row. He was someone who had built his empire from nothing, who had survived storms most people couldn't imagine, and who had learned that the one thing no one could ever take from you was your dignity. So as he stood there, his heart pounding and his jaw tight, he made a silent promise to himself. This will not end like this. He would not allow them to define his worth. He would not walk away humiliated and forgotten. If they thought they could strip him of his seat and his respect without consequence, they had underestimated the wrong man. Steve Harvey didn't just plan to remember this moment. He planned to make sure they never forgot it. When the event finally ended, Steve Harvey didn't rush out in a storm of anger like many might have expected. He didn't shout, he didn't slam doors, and he didn't cause a scene in front of the cameras. Instead, he carried himself with the same composure that had carried him through life's toughest battles. He smiled politely as he walked through the crowd. He shook hands with guests who reached out, nodded kindly to those who greeted him, and kept his face calm. On the outside, he looked like the same Steve Harvey everyone admired. Charming, professional, unbothered. But on the inside, it was a different story. Behind that polite smile, Steve was boiling. His mind wasn't focused on the laughter and congratulations filling the room. No, every step he took was filled with determination. He was already planning his next move. When he reached the backstage area, the organizers were waiting for him. They greeted him with wide grins, acting as if nothing unusual had happened out front. To them, the seating incident was just a small adjustment, a minor detail that didn't matter. In their eyes, Steve Harvey should have brushed it off, smiled, and moved on. One of them even had the nerve to say, "We hope you enjoyed the show, Mr. Harvey." Steve paused, fixing his gaze on the man. The tone was light, casual, but it only fueled the fire inside him. He looked around the room, at the smiling faces of the organizers who had stood by silently while he was humiliated. Then he leaned forward slightly and asked in a calm but piercing voice, "Do you know who I am?" For a split second, they laughed. Nervous chuckles rippled through the group. They thought he was making a joke, just another Steve Harvey punchline to lighten the mood. But then they saw his eyes, steady, sharp, and burning with intensity. The laughter died instantly. "I'm not just a comedian," Steve began, his voice firm. "I'm not just a TV host. I am a man who has built his career on respect, on hard work, and on giving opportunities to others." The room fell silent. You could almost hear the hum of the lights above them. Steve's words carried weight, each one echoing through the space like a hammer striking steel. "And tonight," he continued, his voice rising with controlled power. You showed me exactly who you are. You didn't see me as a guest of honor. You didn't see me as a man who earned his place. You saw me as someone who could be pushed aside. And for what? To please a sponsor? To flatter a man with money? The organizers shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their eyes, others fiddled with their hands, but no one dared to answer. The air in the room grew thick, almost suffocating. Steve took a deep breath, then delivered the line that sealed the moment. Disrespect me once, shame on you. Disrespect me twice, and I'll make sure the world knows who you are. His words cut through the silence like thunder. The message was clear. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about dignity, about principle, about the respect that every person deserves, and the organizers, once so confident, so dismissive, now stood frozen, realizing they had crossed the wrong man. Steve Harvey didn't waste a second. He didn't go home to think it over, didn't sleep on it, and didn't ask for advice. The moment the organizers revealed their true colors, his mind was made up. He turned to his manager, his voice steady and sharp, and delivered just one line. Fire every single person connected to this event. There was no hesitation, no second chances, no room for negotiation, and that's exactly what happened. Within hours, calls were being made, contracts were being torn apart, and doors that had once been open to those organizers were slammed shut. Sponsors, promoters, organizers, anyone who had played even the smallest role in the insult was cut off from working with him again. Deals that were already on the table were canceled. Projects that had been in the works were ended without a second thought. Phone calls from the organizers went unanswered, and every desperate email was deleted before it could even be read. For a man like Steve Harvey, who had built powerful connections across television, radio, comedy, and business, this decision carried enormous weight. His network stretched far and wide, from Hollywood executives to radio station owners, from brand sponsors to event planners. And when Steve said he wouldn't work with someone, those words echoed across the industry. The event organizers didn't realize it at first. They thought it was just one bad night that maybe Steve would calm down and forget. But within days, they began to feel the consequences. Opportunities dried up. Invitations stopped coming. Partnerships that they had depended on vanished one by one. Millions of dollars that could have been theirs disappeared, simply because they had chosen to disrespect the wrong man. The irony was bitter. The same people who thought it was acceptable to push Steve Harvey aside for another VIP were now scrambling in panic, begging for forgiveness. They called, they emailed, they even sent people to try to speak on their behalf, but Steve was unshakable. When one desperate organizer finally managed to reach him, pleading for another chance, Steve gave an answer they would never forget. His words were calm, but they cut deep. Respect is not for sale, and tonight you lost mine forever. There was no anger in his voice, only certainty. For Steve, this wasn't about revenge, it was about principle. He understood something many people forget. Money and fame can come and go, but dignity is priceless. Once you give it away, you can't buy it back. By cutting ties instantly, Steve sent a message not just to those organizers, but to the entire industry. He wasn't a man who could be pushed around. He wasn't someone you could disrespect in public and then smooth things over in private. He was a man who valued integrity over convenience and respect over profit. And from that day forward, anyone who wanted to work with Steve Harvey knew one thing for certain. If you didn't treat him, and others, with respect, you wouldn't get a second chance. News of the incident spread like wildfire. Within hours, whispers turned into headlines, and headlines turned into trending stories across social media. Some people couldn't believe what had happened. How could one of the most respected entertainers in the world be treated with such blatant disrespect? Others weren't surprised, pointing out that money and influence often blind people to what's right. The event organizers found themselves under heavy criticism. Their carefully crafted image of being inclusive and celebrating diversity shattered almost overnight. Commentators called them out, celebrities voiced support for Steve, and fans everywhere applauded his decision to stand firm. But while the world argued about the incident, Steve Harvey stayed calm. He didn't lash out, he didn't rant online, and he didn't carry bitterness in his voice. Instead, when he finally addressed the situation, he spoke with wisdom. He reminded people of a powerful truth. No matter how successful you become, No matter how far you rise, there will always be people who try to make you feel small. There will always be moments when someone wants to strip you of your dignity to make themselves feel taller. But the real test isn't what they do to you, it's how you respond. Steve's response became a lesson not just for his fans, but for anyone who had ever felt overlooked, disrespected, or underestimated. He laid it out simply, in the kind of language that stays with you long after you hear it. Never allow anyone to treat you like you don't belong. You worked hard for your place, and you deserve to stand proudly in it. Respect yourself enough to walk away from disrespect. Staying silent may feel easier in the moment, but it comes at the cost of your self-worth. Use your voice to stand up for what's right. Even if your voice shakes, even if you stand alone, your courage can inspire others. That night, Steve Harvey proved something far greater than the value of a seat in the front row. He showed the world that money, fame, and prestige mean nothing without dignity. A VIP ticket doesn't make you important. Your integrity does. When he refused to be silent, when he chose respect over comfort and principle over popularity, he froze the entire room. Everyone who witnessed the moment realized that they had just seen a man stand taller than any stage could ever make him, and perhaps the most powerful part of his response came in his final words to those who tried to belittle him. "If you take away my chair, I'll build my own table." It wasn't just a clapback, it was a declaration. A reminder that your worth isn't defined by where someone places you. If people push you aside, you don't beg to be let back in. You create your own path, your own opportunities, your own seat of power. For Steve Harvey, this incident wasn't a setback. It was a platform. A stage bigger than the one he had been denied. And for everyone who heard his story, it was a challenge. Value your dignity above everything else. Because that's the one thing no one can ever take from you. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and inspiring stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.